Olá, Evgenia.
Olá, Marco.
Olá a todos aqueles que nos estão a ouvir nesta gravação. A Evgenia é a nossa próxima Game World Builder. Portanto, bem-vindos ao Innovations for the Future Game World Builder interview. We will speak in English. The game world of Evgenia is Eternal Forest. And yeah, maybe that is the first question. What is Eternal Forest in your words, Evgenia?
Thank you for having me. Muito obrigada. Boa tarde, bom dia a todos. What is Eternal Forest? Well, I would say, first of all, what comes to my mind when I say that is Eternal Forest is a being that is alive, that is growing, that is regenerating itself, that is very active, that is very sentient, and it's very, very intelligent. So when people create projects, they usually continue working and think, oh, I'm doing a project. At some point, I realized that actually I'm assisting a birth and growth of a being. And this is what Eternal Forest tells me, how it wants to be. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say, that is an artistic endeavor. However, it brings various strengths into itself. So the center of it is art and community. However, I like to think that we are co-creating it together as humans, as beings, but also as people from different disciplines. And more, as I assist this being, I am understanding that we need to work together as artists, scientists, regenerators, thinkers, philosophers, writers, and practitioners who work with the land every day. So, practically speaking, what is it? Eternal Forest is a vision to create 1,000 and hopefully more eternal forest sanctuaries, protected forest spaces that are created through artistic experience, created for and also by the communities and protected by the communities, hopefully in perpetuity. We say for 1,000 years, but hopefully even more, even beyond that time, more with the idea of the forest time. So it's just a short answer to this question. There's deeper layers, of course, more details.
Yes, thank you, Evgenia. It was so beautiful to listen to you putting all that vision together. And what is the can you tell us the three stories that are the stepstones for you arriving to this idea, to this Eternal Forest manifestation? What happened in your life? What is the three main stories that put you in this track?
Good question, thank you. So I guess that the very, very first story, or the first stepping stone, the first impulse, it really came from the year 2017, literally the same year as we arrived to Portugal. And the impulse came from a very particular situation, the gathering for Reflorestar Portugal, for the reforestation and regeneration of Portugal. And I think this was really the turning point for me as an artist to witness something that is very different from art and has a very, very strong need, has very, very strong perspective, and very strong impulse to connect community together to be able to regenerate and reforest the land. And I personally had a very, very deep emotional experience back then, because that gathering, as you probably all know, happened after the fires in Portugal. And people came together to think how the land can be regenerated and how everybody can participate in this regeneration and reforestation. And so my first initial impulse and my first work started straight after that gathering. I decided that I will go and work in Goiás after the fires. So there were two fires this year in Pedrógão Grande and Goiás. Pedrógão Grande in June, I believe, and Goiás later in October. And I worked 6 months after the fire in Goiás in April and March in 2018. And that was, I guess, the second really important point after that decision that I made in Reflorestar Portugal, to try to understand the basis under the situation with monocultures and fires and large-scale deforestation. That second stage was already in the art residency, where I made a decision to work directly with the communities and to interview them for my film Eternal Forest, which came out in 2018, in which I tried to kind of uncover the core cause of the issue of deforestation in Portugal. So that was really important point where I opened my ears and eyes and just gave myself fully to the listening experience, listening to the communities and listening to the people and listening to the land, as I now see and understand. What is it really happening? How did we arrive there? And where are we going? And where I can insert myself and where I can contribute with this process of thinking about how we can be more participating in the process of reforestation. By the way, do we have a really big noise on the background?
No, it's
good.
It's good.
So these are two stages, I would say, that were really, really important. And then the third stage that was really important was my work for Bienal de Coruj in 2020, for which basically I proposed to already to create an eternal forest sanctuary. So my idea was, what if we take a piece of land and what if we dedicate it to a forest sanctuary? We plant species that need to be there, that are missing. We try to recuperate the ecosystem. We try to do ecosystem restoration, but we also create artistic experiences in the midst of this forest. So by creating art and inviting people to experience art and also planting and regenerating the space, what if we could then invite the whole community to think about protecting that space? So that's when I developed the concept for the actual Eternal Forest Sanctuary. And since then, I'm developing it in different locations with different communities, listening what the people want to do, what the land wants to become, where is the opportunity for us to create these pockets, hotspots for biodiversity, and basically say, well, maybe they are untouchable. They are just there for the biodiversity sake. They're there for the forest sake, for the forest beings. And we as humans can play the role of guardians of the spaces.
Thank you, Evgenia. Your idea has a very interesting innovations. One of them, it's you put yourself in the middle, in the forest context, and you bring all the forest as a being, as a being alive, as a being that has his own needs. You put yourself with this window of 1,000 years. It's completely mind-blowing to think in the modern culture in more than 4 years, and you are putting 10 years could be long run for the modern culture. You are multiplying that for 100 and say, no, it's much more. We need to think, if we want to have a legacy, if we want to have a condition of life, we need to think in a completely different way. You are bringing this element of community, saying, yes, this is a forest, but we are human beings, we are here, and we are part of the community, and the community has a role to play here in the forest. You are bringing artists together and say, guys, we need to work in the ecology, we need to work in restoration, we need to see nature with a completely different eyes, because we have this tendency in the modern art not to look to life, to look to other realms, but not to look to life. And you are saying, now we need to look to life and look with a completely different eyes. And you also are bringing science and say, yes, there is a language, there is a knowledge, there is practice that are being made here. Yes, we need to create new stuff, and we already have some knowledge about that. And I was particularly touched with the work that you made around eucalyptus, that you bring all the wisdom, the traditional wisdom, the scientific wisdom, the different approach to that realm, saying that there is knowledge here, there is experience, there is tradition. This knowledge, it's not only 1,000 years knowledge, it's a knowledge for several generations that people are creating. These trees are sacred in other parts of the world. And yes, you are bringing all these elements together. And my next question is what really touched you in that gathering in Refrescar Portugal, and that really spoke in you about this forest, about this thing that is alive? What is really deep inside of you, Evgenia, that resonate and really touch for you to go and work in this context and with this intensity? Because it's too intense. It's a very intense project. It's a very complex and intense project. What really touched you? What is in the heart of that, in you, that was really abanada, was really what really touched you in this context? What is the pain there?
Yeah, the pain. Well, in the heart is the heart. Because I remember sitting in one of the smaller circles, and I witnessed something very painful and very beautiful. I witnessed men crying, which in our culture we don't see much. As a male, not men in general, but as a male. I mean, there were people crying, and there were people very emotional. But that was this moment, that was the person in my little circle of 4 or 5 people in front of me. And I really felt that pain. And I could resonate with that pain. And I could feel that pain of knowing and needing to do, and also knowing that there is a disruption. Knowing that there is a connection, that we are part of nature, we are not separate from it, but also knowing that actually there is disconnect in our minds, first of all, and then in our actions. And of course, since then, I felt other things. I felt the pain in the land, which actually, it seems like obvious thing when you see devastation, when you see monocultures, when you see fires in monocultures and natural forests burning because of monocultures, etc. When you see a lot of places being poisoned because of the chemicals, monocultures are also connected with chemicals. There is a lot of pain, but also, and that is very obvious to feel that and to witness that. And I think a lot of people are very much aware. But actually, I also witnessed other kind of feelings connected with this pain that is long-term, that is ancient. And I give you one example, or a couple of examples. When I used to go to some locations where we are working together with the local communities to create eternal forest sanctuaries, and I walk the land on my own through long time. I just go there alone, and I spend many hours. And I ask the land, what does she want? What does she dream of? What does she need? A lot of the time, I felt in Coruche, in Abrigada, in many, many, many places, these very, very deep scars in the land. And the land is almost always telling me there is always the process of healing that needs to be done. There is a process of reconnecting the natural flow of the land. It's like mending the fabric that the land is, with all her beings, with all her processes, with all her rivers and water lines and many and borough paths and many things. And so usually that comes to me straight away when I go to visit the land, is that pain that is years and years and years of extraction, sometimes terraforming on purpose, and sometimes connected with abandonment because it doesn't give already nothing, it doesn't give enough. So all this is very complex, but what I see in the whole picture, the land that offers that picture, that image in the moment, is she's saying, help me to reestablish that natural flow that I am. And that's where that moment, that portal that opens, where I think we can enter. I know that we can enter, and we can, by very simple actions that people all around Portugal and beyond are doing, by restoring the water lines, by planting trees, by putting the seeds, by simply sitting under the tree, by simply observing a tree that has fallen and decomposing and seeing the death and the beauty and all these elements, by simply being with the land, sleeping on the land sometimes. It's not always that we always need to do the action of planting or the action of forming and helping the land to recover. Sometimes it's the action of non-action, of just being there present with all of our presence. And not always having the solution straight away. So the dreaming with the land, that is where I'm entering, and that's where I'm trying to bring everybody with me. And this is what the land is requesting of me, and this is what eternal forest is for. So there was one very interesting moment when a lot of people, I was showing my film all around Portugal, and a lot of people were asking me, like, what do you really want to do? What is the difference between eternal forest and, for example, forest park or agroforest or a botanical garden or a beautiful, productive land, beautiful forest where we respect, like a permaculture forest, permaculture project? And I couldn't answer this question. I could answer it like on a very intellectual level. And then I sat down and they said, okay, I'm not going to answer this question. Let eternal forest answer this question, because it's a being. So help me, tell me how I can explain to the people, how I can make this differentiation. Why is it different? And of course, I already knew before that a little bit of history of the sacred groves around the world. And I come from Eastern Europe, so sacred groves are still very much alive in Eastern Europe, in India, in some other places in the world. So in a way, for me, that was a mental and spiritual model for eternal forest sanctuaries. Sacred grove is a place that is fully protected, very untouchable. You cannot cut trees there. You cannot take from sacred grove. It's really a place of power. And we go there, apart from other things and connecting with ancestral spirit, we also go there to dream with the land. So I already had this connection. And then when I asked this question to the eternal forest, tell me, how can I explain to the people what is the difference? It told me that the difference is that every kind of place that we create, a beautiful garden that is next to the house, a beautiful horta, a beautiful agroforest system, etc., a bigger conservation project, they all have their meaning and their point of view and their offering and their way of being, and they all have space, and we should create many of these places. However, eternal forest serves a very particular purpose. It is a kind of creative and spiritual place for the people, where they can be also in a way kind of free to contemplate, rather than to always go there with intention to work, to always work to take some things out for themselves. So in a way, they are free to let their mind and let their heart open and to dream with the land, to ask questions that are difficult, that are deeper, and also over longer periods of time. So winning the time to be with the forest to dream with the forest and the land, to be able to co-create and to come up with solutions that maybe we cannot even imagine today, with solutions and technologies and methods and approaches. And art and creativity can enhance this process and can open possibilities that maybe we don't see today because we just go there in a different way. And that dreaming actually relates to many indigenous practices that people have in nature and with nature. And that dreaming is not just resting when we are tired, but it's actually a very, very active process, dreaming awake. And that is, I think, what is really missing in our society. And this is, I think, that what we are slowly reclaiming. To reclaim that dreaming together with nature, being part of that space and that place, specifically locally in each and every place. So in a way, eternal forests are kind of dreaming places.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that to that place, because there is this question between what we live, this modern culture, survival mode, extractive mindset, all that thing, and what you are talking about, Evgenia, is a completely mind change. In a way, it's mind-blowing for most of us, and for the people that are with their feet in modern culture. What is the really, what is the bridge that Eternal Forest is making for this modern culture and the next culture, whatever is next culture, that we maybe we dream with a more regenerative, more relation-based with life and with people kind of culture, but I don't know, it will be, for sure, the culture is evolving. And what is the role of Eternal Forest in that context? What are you pushing for? What is the kind of tenets that you are seeing that we need to embrace for having an opportunity to enjoy and live in this beautiful planet?
I guess that what I'm proposing is to imagine time differently. So we are very much used to very fractured time, very partitioned time, very linear time, and also time that is usually going forward. Very few of us are truly living with cycles. And in the best case scenario, I guess we are living with cycles of the sun and the moon, right? So we're kind of obeying the cycle of the year. If people stick with the cycles, we kind of remember still there are solstices and equinoxes. This information comes, this knowledge comes more alive. But there are many, many more cycles. And time is cycles within cycles. So time is very, very complex. So my proposal to reimagine time, and at the beginning, of course, I was approaching that thinking from the perspective of long term. So 1,000 years is the time of an ancient forest, or the forest that is becoming a real forest, becoming ancient. And it was quite a big jump for a lot of people. They were asking me, why can't you just take 100 years? So that proposition of time as a long-term stretch that is beyond one or even many human lifetimes, beyond many generations, I believe that it creates continuity that is actually quite broken in our culture. So we have lost the cult of ancestors, or the relationship, let's say, with our ancestors. We used to have, religions connected to our ancestors. We used to have many practices and many forms of respecting and remembering ancestors. And I'm not talking only about human ancestors. That's another thing. We're actually talking about relating to stone ancestors and grass ancestors and mushroom ancestors and insect ancestors and fish, and we remembering where we come from and rewriting our narrative, our mythology as we go right now. A lot of people are saying, well, now they can relate much more to non-human ancestors. That is another dimension that is opening, which I believe is very much connected with this concept of cyclical time that repeats again and again. And then going back to the concept of time, imagine we have big cycle and then smaller cycle, but then we have also cycles that are not human. The cycles of a tree, the cycle of the fruiting and the blossoming, and we can celebrate them. So going back to bringing it back to eternal forest, what do I propose? I propose that communities can actually celebrate those cycles within their locality, within what grows and what blossoms and what fruits there and what is offered and what is happening. Celebrate the cycles of animals, celebrate the cycles of trees and plants and mushrooms and so on. And having those celebrations as part of their normal life, their everyday life, and their smaller and larger cycles. And that can be done through experiences, through festivals, through mini pilgrimages, through bigger pilgrimages, through vision quests, and so on. And there's literally a whole way opening for us when we start thinking about it. It can be very personal, it can be on the level of the community. So that's that. So I think the experiential work within Eternal Forest is the bridge that I'm making to this understanding of time differently, of other than human beings differently, and also of our place within this beautiful ecosystem. Like what is my role? If my role is just to commit now to this life and to contribute with specific project, I think it's beautiful, it's good enough if we can do it. If my role is to expand and extend myself beyond that, and actually just relaxed into understanding that I'm just a part of a cycle embedded into this incredible fractal time, then I think our perception of ourselves also can change from this discontinuity, disruption, and fragmentation to much more embeddedness and connectedness within the ecosystem. And I think what happens then, what happened to me specifically, is I just relaxed into this understanding. I stopped pushing things, I stopped demanding things, I stopped trying to make things happen. I started just letting them happen, letting them take their own course and let them just evolve naturally. Of course, I'm assisting, as I said before, but I'm not pushing so much. So for me, right now in this moment, and it might change after 1 or 2 or 3 years, the bridge that I'm making is experiential. The bridge that I'm making is try to inspire as many communities as I can to create physical eternal forests, and also to create a network that is alive and interconnected globally. These 3 things, I would say, is my focus. However, I also acknowledge that because it's a very big project and it's a being in itself, it has its own intelligence, it can also take its own course, and things will open that I cannot even imagine right now. And this is my hope as well, that other people come in, other artists, other scientists, other regenerators will come in and bring their own elements and proposals and ideas and possibilities.
Evgenia, in your language and also in your words, you talk about the regeneration and the regenerative movement, and you can say the regenerative cultures. How that is important for Eternal Project? Why you brought that? Why you use that language? How that kind of mindset and approach help you to do this shift from modern culture to something else?
So I have been witnessing this, living in this kind of age and time, kind of many different iterations of what when we talk about ecology, what we actually mean and what we do. And it's quite interesting to see how language that we use affects what we do and how we are in this process, in this movement. And it's interesting because when we speak about sustainability and regeneration, for example, sometimes I feel they're quite opposing, or people could perceive as opposing. However, I really had a really beautiful mind shift this year, or last year, let's say, that being with the cycles and rebirthing the cycles continuously, the little cycles and the bigger cycles. And for me, this is regeneration in principle, but also other things. We actually going and aiming towards living more grounded and living more sustainably. So what I observed last year is sustainability kind of being pushed away, I guess more in the mainstream. Oh, this is an old thing. Now let's use regeneration. And that is a little bit sad to observe, because in fact, it is the opposite. It is by understanding that we are not yet sustainable fully, and we cannot be because there are a lot of elements that are still not there, that we need to absorb and we need to fully embrace the elements of regeneration and fully embody that. Then we can hope that in our generations, in our age, we can see the results that we could say that, okay, we are living more sustainably. So for me, I guess that regeneration is also connected with transforming something, with transitioning into something, and really deep transformation process. And again, it's connected with experiential work. So I give you an example. In art, when we talk, going back to contemporary art, contemporary art has been serving quite specific purposes recently. It's been a lot about entertainment, it's been a lot about investment and return, kind of hinging on our financial system. It's been a lot about creating big things and calling it art, and sometimes they're beautiful, sometimes they're meaningful, sometimes they communicate important ideas. However, very few examples where we can say that art is truly embedded into the ecology. And so as I started growing into and understanding what eternal forest was, I also wanted to understand how art can be truly ecological. Not just talking about ecology, but actually doing it and becoming part of the ecologies that being embedded. So as an example, we can think about sacred art of ancient times, when art was not separated from life. If you go hunting, or if you create a ceremony, this is in between. Art is part of this. Art was never separate. Some of the most beautiful art that we know now that has been preserved is embedded in the natural environment, in caves and on the rock formations, and formed in the landscape itself that we can see from above. And so there have been very interesting dimension in art that we call land art from the 60s. And it's been a really beautiful attempt, very powerful attempt that was very well supported financially to go there. However, I think there was this moment that we were not yet ready. There was funding available to literally move the land, but there was so much, I would say, ego connected with it that we literally moved huge tracts of land to create these huge pieces that can be seen from above. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. I think it's a process that we as humanity went through. And so for me, land art is going towards, but not yet so regenerative. Some examples could be called. So there were a lot of things done that we could argue that could have been done better. Forests planted that are total monocultures, land moved. We don't know if it's a good or bad thing for the actual ecosystem itself, etc. So for me, going towards regeneration and thinking how art can contribute and how art can be more regenerative, which means much more embedded into the cycles to really close the cycle, means that we have to think in advance, and we have to think like a forest or like an ocean or like a mountain and all the beings with it. How would they be part of it? So give you an example. Let's create a trail through the forest. So when we create an experiential artistic trail through the forest, this is the work that I'm doing now with Monsanto Forest Park and with other places, I have to think what would be the impact of this trail. Of course, I would like to create a really beautiful, poetic, aesthetical, spiritual experience for the people, to really open them up and to allow them to fall in love with the place and to get to know the place intimately. But I would also like to acknowledge that there are beings that live there. And when we enter certain parts of the forest, we need to understand that we are guests there. And that our footsteps will be accompanied by kind of other eyes watching us. And how do we go there? How do we enter that forest? With what kind of intention? With what kind of focus? What do we take out? And what do we bring back afterwards? So it's not just a one-time experience. My dream is that there will be continuous getting to know the place. And as you get to know the place intimately and plant a few things, we will be capable of protecting the place because we feel totally embedded in the place. We feel like we are totally part of it. It's like the new way of going hunting. We don't hunt, but we go there to experience and to enjoy and get to know all the plants and how they grow and how the animals move, and how the plants move as well with time. They don't stay in one place. And that wisdom and knowledge, that experiential, bodily, time-based knowledge, it's a process. So forest is a process, and we are a process as well, together with that ecosystem. And for me, that relates, that's how I understand regeneration.
Thank you, Evgenia, to put so clearly. I love the clarity you have about this different contexts and different parts. It really brings me to a place of contemplation. This is listening, where the being eternal force want to go. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, about what is the work that you do in yourself to be there for that being, to be present to that being. How did you care for yourself? What is the work that you do in this beautiful being that I have in front of me that calls for the name Evgenia? What is the work that you do in yourself, and how you do it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I stay with the forest a lot. I take time in my life to go. I'm now going to be in Monsanto Forest Park for 2 weeks, fully, every day, spending morning until dusk in the forest. This is my way of being in the same place every day, getting to know the place. And I just allow myself to be guided. So my way of doing that is I will be creating trail, for example. So I'll be working with a concrete focus to create trail, to then bring people on the trail. But at the same time, as I have that intention and calling to the forest to offer me the wisdom, I just open up and I go listen. So I go and just get lost there and let my feet take me to where it needs to go, and let me be dreaming, inspired, let the poetry come to me. There is one thing that I learned in the last 2 years, I would say, that came quite spontaneously. So I started having dreams at the beginning when I was about the time of working in Croatia. I was writing manifesto, and I had probably the first really strong dream of a tree appearing, and the tree had very, very specific elements around it and structure. And that was the tree that appeared because it wanted to communicate to me something that needed to be in the manifesto, Eternal Forest Manifesto, this long piece of work that I wrote down. But then I started having more and more and more dreams with trees and different beings of the forest appearing and communicating to me. So I believe that the universe knows that I am very much connected with my dreams. Everybody is different. Some people will be very good with their eyes or tactile, or they will have to go and make something, you know. That's why there are people who would rather go and plant trees. They're like, oh no, don't talk to me about all of that because it's just too much in the air. I just want to plant. So call me when you're going to be planting. But I'm very much connected with my dreams. So personally, I allow myself time to dream when I sleep, so through my actual dreams, but also when I go there. So just be there, just a chunk of time to dedicate. And I know that our lives are very demanding. And in a way, I feel very, very like privileged to be able to do this work because I'm also an artist and I'm also a freelancer. So I can kind of choose the projects that I want to do and how I want to do it. So in a way, when I create a project, I say, well, I'd like to go and stay there in an art residency and just be fully immersed every day, to have that dedicated time and space to be with that particular forest being. Ideally, it's 1 month, 2 months. And I realized by doing that the forest needs us to dedicate that time, that precious time, where the forest has time and ability to communicate to us. Because the forest exists on a different timeline. We already understand it's thousands of years. Then you have little forest beings that change. So imagine you go there and you observe opening of a leaf, of a little new leaves over the period of 1 or 2 weeks. This is magical, this is fascinating, and it's a privilege to be able to witness that day after day after day. And it is very simple. So in a way, I believe, and of course that goes back to the whole regenerative movement, the whole movement of people wanting to settle and be in communities and be with the land. I believe that making ourselves local to the place and giving ourselves this long, deep time to observe and to listen, it's really, really, really important, and it works for me. And another thing that I wanted to share that works for me and that I believe it's not so difficult to learn is really listening to the plants. I think we are more prone to listen to animals, especially domestic animals, or the animals that we work with. Some people have horses and I don't know, chickens and goats, and they're very much connected with them. I'm very connected with the plants personally, so I don't have animals. I like animals in the wilderness. I prefer to see them wild rather than domestic. But the plants really speak to me. So I give myself an opportunity to go and sit with a particular plant and to notice when I enter a place, when I enter the forest, all right, like, who is here? I'm Evgenia. I'm coming here with this intention of just going for a walk, or maybe grounding, taking my shoes off, or maybe my intention is to create trail for other people. So please help me, be my guides. There is always one plant that will pop and speak to you and show itself and be like, I'm here, hello. It might be a tree or like a really small grass or a bush, and it will really attract your attention. And it is they have messages. They always talk to us. Sometimes we need them for medicinal purposes to harmonize ourselves. So sometimes plant will say, take me and make a tea or something else. So I learned this from several sources. One of the sources is something that is called plant spirit medicine. One of the very big teachers, unfortunately, passed just at the end of the year, Stephen Bergner, and he published many different books, beautiful books that teach that, but also there are many teachings that show that plants and ecosystems and whole areas of forest and desert and rivers, for me, it's one continuum, but let's say in this case, forests communicate to us, and we can learn to listen, and we can learn from them. So my approach of centering myself and grounding myself and really staying with this process and being able to stay open and empty certain periods of time to really immerse myself and to really listen deeply to what is coming to me.
Evgenia, what is the next steps for Eterna Forest? What is happening now, and what is the next steps?
So this year I will be very, very much focused on quite a beautiful big project with amazing partners. The project will take place in Lisbon. It will be May and June specifically, but art residency already starts happening in January, throughout February and March. I will be working, I continue working with Monsanto Forest Park. I already work with them since 2 years. And I will start working with the Stufa Fria in Lisbon. So the project will encompass 2 exhibitions in each of the spaces, and 2 trails in Monsanto Forest Park, and 1 experience in Stufa Fria. There will be exhibition, there will be experiences, there will be events, there will be hopefully a book published, and so on, and the program will be available soon. This project is aimed on bringing around the Eternal Forest a council, scientific council, let's say, but also quite multidisciplinary council. I am right now working and collaborating. The partners for this project is CRIA, which is a Center for Anthropology. It's throughout Portugal. There are several centers. And with the CIS3C, with Center for Ecology in the University of Lisbon, and Monsanto Forest Park, Estufa Fria, and Câmara Municipal de Lisboa. The point of this project is to show, with the example of Monsanto Forest Park, which is a man-made forest, that is 90-year-old forest, to show what is possible and to pilot specific key ideas and concepts and bring critical thinking around the process and the project, and to invite all these different thinkers and scientists to contribute to experiencing together, writing feedback, co-creating certain elements, but also contributing for the book. So I draw a lot of inspiration from the science, but then I'm interested in how we can actually not just be inspired by science and create as artists, but how we can work together. Because in my vision, in the first years, to create pilots of Eternal Forest, which is also happening slowly in Portugal and beyond, is to bring scientists from the start. For example, to monitor biodiversity from the very start, to monitor soil health and trees health, and to keep monitoring throughout the process of restoration, ecosystem restoration, regeneration, and full protection. So if we could say, why don't we see the benchmark perspective, where we start from and how it develops? If we were to let this forest become old growth forest, of course, it will require several hundred years, but we need to start somewhere. So this year will be dedicated to really, really bringing this circle of people together who are interested in collaborating within this project. There will be more partners. And at the same time, developing and helping, supporting the development of those sanctuaries that are emerging in Portugal and also abroad. I have 2 projects popping up, one in Colombia, one in the USA. There are several in Portugal. They are kind of ongoing, slowly evolving. The reason why it's so slow, everybody knows, because to protect the forest, we need community. We can plant everything today, but there is no sense, and it's very difficult actually in Portugal because of the ecological reasons, to create forest without community being fixed in the space. So I am staying with the slow process, visiting a lot of emerging communities or communities in development, and proposing and offering this work together. And also this year we got our land, our kind of private land, so we will be also creating a small pilot there. We have a nearby forest of 100 hectares that is a private forest. On our land there is no forest, but we will be creating like a very, very small forest, probably something close to Miyawaki forest, because it's a very small space. Usually eternal forests are more immersive spaces, about 4 to 10 hectares and more. But in this case, because the land is so small, it will be more like a focal point, but it will have pattern language of eternal forest, like a space for gathering, space for contemplation, etc. So this is going to be my work for 2023. And I'm very, very open to visiting communities and hearing if people are creating projects of regeneration, projects on the land, communities settling. So I'm very, very happy to support and explore together these possibilities.
Thank you, Evgenia. We talk about the essence of eternal forest, and in a way we already start talking about your essence as an artist and as a being, and I want to close with that. Listen from you, what is your essence and how is that essence manifesting in eternal forest?
I'm going to read you a poem, very short one. Okay. I plant the word of people, with the blood of the tree of the forest.
Thank you, Evgenia.
Yeah.
Thank you for this conversation and for bringing and showing yourself and the way you are manifesting this project, this game world.
Thank you.
And I hope that is 10,000 and not 1,000 forests.
I like it. I always like to hear when people say, of course, why only 1,000? Let's go beyond.
Yeah. Thank you.
So maybe I should accept it as a challenge for the next time I write it down.
And it also 10,000 is a very spiritual number, in the sense that several traditions talk about the infinity as a 10,000 thing. It's that.
Yes, it's done. You said that.
Thank you, Evgenia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Até já.
Até já, obrigada.